Good afternoon, everyone. So, today, as we do every month, a session by an external speaker, we have Sister Smita Pragya Patro, who would be taking the session today. And she's going to talk about mostly the challenges of youth and solutions given by Theosophical Society. So, her topic is Challenges of Youth and Theosophical Solutions. To introduce Smita Pragya, I'm sure many of you sitting here know Smita Pragya as a very vibrant young theosophist who has conducted many camps for young members. She has been a speaker in many forums, and she's a young member from Pythagoras Youth Lodge from Bhubaneswar, and she became a member in 2005, inspired by Brother Pradeep Mahapatra and Sister Mitalini Mahapatra. She became a member precisely in 2006. She came in contact with them in 2005. Since then, she has been actively participating, coordinating, speaking, designing programs. Our very recent upcoming program is in June for the youth camp. So she has been a wonderful person coordinating such programs. Also, she is our Indian representative for World Federation of Young Theosophists. She has been a youth coordinator for YIT Indian section also. And there is this young magazine, Turya. It's a national youth magazine of the TS. She's the editor. She's the one who kind of conceptualized and made all of us work towards releasing of this magazine. Very recently, we released that, and she has been organizing camps in mostly in India, and she has spoken in many forums in India and international. Over to you, Smita Pragya. I'm sure we are going to have a good time and learning a lot of things from you.
Thank you, Sister Subrina. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Am I audible to you all?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. So, let's start. I will begin with a beautiful quote. Thy soul has to become as the ripe mango fruit, as soft and sweet as its bright golden pulp for others' woes, and as hard as that fruit's stone for thine own sorrows. I feel this quote beautifully describes what humanity needs today: softness towards the suffering of others and strength in facing our own difficulties. Today, I would like to speak about the challenges faced by modern youth and the solutions that Theosophy offers to humanity. But this is not merely a talk about stress, anxiety, or suffering. It is a reflection on the way we are living, the kind of society we are creating, and the direction in which humanity itself is moving. Especially today, young people are facing confusion, pressure, insecurity, loneliness, comparison, emotional exhaustion, and fear on a scale perhaps never seen before. And therefore, it becomes important for us to ask, why is this happening? And even more importantly, what is the solution? Because unless we understand the root cause of suffering, no lasting solution is possible. Today, when we look around, stress has almost become a normal part of life. Students experience stress regarding studies, examinations, job placements, and future uncertainty. Working people experience stress regarding careers, promotions, financial security, and social expectations. Even children today experience pressure at very young age. Now, certainly, a small amount of stress is natural and even necessary. If a student has examinations approaching, some degree of pressure encourages preparation and discipline. But The problem begins when the stress no longer remains temporary. It slowly becomes a permanent condition of the mind. And when that happens, the consequences become serious. Stress affects not only the mind but also the body. It can lead to anxiety, depression, emotional imbalance, insomnia, frustration, hopelessness, and sometimes even self destructive tendencies. But if we observe carefully, we may discover something very important. The real struggle is often not outside us, the real struggle begins within the mind itself. A student worries, what if I fail? What if others become more successful than me? What will society think about me? A working professional worries, if I do not succeed, I may fall behind. If others progress faster than me, what will happen to my future? And gradually, without realizing it, life becomes a race of comparison, competition, jealousy, hatred. We compare our achievements, our appearance, our career, our wealth, our lifestyles, and even our happiness. It's all about me. Earlier, perhaps a person compared themselves only with neighbors or relatives. But today, through social media, comparison was it's constant. It became constant. Every day, young minds are exposed to hundreds of images showing success, luxury, beauty, fame, relationships, and seemingly perfect lives. I will tell you, I'll repeat one more time. Every day, young minds are exposed to hundreds of images showing success, luxury, beauty, fame, relationships, and seemingly perfect lives. I'm not saying here perfect lives, it seems perfect. And unconsciously, the mind begins to feel inadequate. I'm not successful enough. I'm not enough. I'm not attractive enough. My life is not meaningful enough. But what we often forget is that social media mostly shows appearances, not reality. Nowadays, in social media, like you can see the YouTubes, Instagrams, everywhere you see only show off. Everybody is showing how happy they are, how successful they are, how beautiful they are, how talented they are, but nobody is showing what is the reality, what is behind that. Behind smiling photographs may uh, exist loneliness, behind success may exist anxiety, behind luxury may exist emptiness, but we don't see that. We see what has been shown to us, what is portrayed in front of us. Yet when the mind continuously compares itself with others, peace slowly disappears. And perhaps this is one of the greatest psychological burdens carried by modern youth today. Sometimes I personally feel that many young people are not weak by nature, they are simply mentally exhausted. Outwardly, they smile, interact, and continue functioning normally, but inwardly, many are carrying silent fear, confusion, pressure, and loneliness that nobody notices. And therefore, instead of merely criticizing youth, perhaps we must begin understanding them more compassionately. Now, naturally, we begin saying, I'm stressed because of studies, I'm stressed because of work, I'm stressed because of family responsibilities. But is that so? If we go deeper, we may discover that studies, work, or responsibilities are not always the real cause of suffering. Very often, the deeper cause is psychological. It is our endless desire, comparison, expectation, fear, attachment, and dissatisfaction. One desire gets fulfilled, and immediately another takes its place. And this endless movement of desire keeps the mind restless. There is a beautiful story which explains this wonderfully. I have read it somewhere, I don't remember exactly. Once there was a king who came out of his palace and saw a beggar. The king proudly said, "Today I am very happy. Ask whatever you desire, and I shall fulfill it." The beggar replied, "Think carefully before making such a promise." But the king insisted. The beggar then showed him a ball, said, "If you truly wish to help me, then simply fill this ball." The king laughed and ordered his servants to fill the ball with gold coins. But as soon as the coins were poured into the ball, they disappeared. More gold were brought. Again it disappeared. This continued until evening, until the treasury and everything emptied. Finally, the king was very shocked, and he fell into the at the feet of the beggar, and then he asked, uh, "Please tell me of which material this is made up of. What is this? What kind of bowl is it?" The beggar quietly replied, "This bowl is made up of human desire, and human desire can never truly be filled. And perhaps if we honestly observe our own lives, we may discover the same truth. If we own a bicycle, for an example, we desire a motorbike. If we own a motorbike, we desire a car. If we own a car, we desire for luxury car. And if we uh, own a luxury car, there is some varieties. I mean, like Mercedes, Benz, Rolls Royce, Lamborghini. I mean, they have their uh, limits. I mean, if you have something, then you want something more. So the object changes, but the restlessness remains the same. And slowly, we stop enjoying what we already possess because the mind is constantly running towards what is still missing. Perhaps we should ask ourselves honestly, how often do we really appreciate what we already have? How often do we experience gratitude? How often do we live peacefully in the present moment? For example, when we go to temple or when we pray to God, how many times we have shown gratitude? How many times we have said thanks to God? Thank you, God, for giving me everything. Thank you, God, for giving me this life, this opportunity. Rather, we complain. You didn't give me this, you did this with me. Why my life is so miserable? Why I'm facing this much of trouble? We complain. This reminds me of another meaningful story, the story of 99 Club. I don't remember from where I read the story because I have lots of stories I read somewhere, and then I don't know from where I read the story. So I read the story somewhere. Once there was a king who possessed wealth, luxury, and power, yet inwardly remained unhappy. One day he saw a servant joyfully singing while working. The king became curious and asked, "How can you remain so happy despite having so little?" The servant replied, "Your Majesty, my family has food to eat and a roof over our heads. What more do we truly need?" The king couldn't understand this happiness, so he approached his advisor. The advisor smiled and said, "Your Majesty, perhaps the servant has not yet become a member of the 99 Club." The king asked, "What is the 99 Club?" The advisor instructed him to secretly leave a bag containing 99 gold coins outside the servant's house. As per the instruction, the bag of 99 gold coins were kept at the door of the servant's house. The servant discovered the bag and became overwhelmed with joy. But when he counted the coins, he noticed something. There was only 99 coins. Immediately his mind became disturbed. One coin is missing. Certainly no one will put 99 coins in the bag. From that moment, his peace disappeared. He began working endlessly to obtain the 100th coin. He stopped singing, he stopped enjoying life. Seeing him, the king was surprised and asked his advisor, to which he replied, "Your Majesty, he is now officially a member of 99 Club." The advisor then explained, "The 99 Club consists of people who have enough to live happily but never feel content because they are always chasing something more." And perhaps this story reveals something very deep about modern humanity. The problem is not merely lack of possessions, the deeper problem is inner dissatisfaction. We have forgotten how to live in the present moment. In The Light on the Path, it is written, "Kill out ambition," and again, "Kill out desire for comfort." This does not mean comfort itself is wrong. The real danger begins when desire becomes endless and begins controlling the mind. Because then happiness always remains somewhere in the future. And a mind constantly chasing the future can never remain peaceful in the present. Interestingly, the same truth appears in many spiritual traditions. Buddhism teaches through the Four Noble Truths that suffering exists and that one of the major causes of suffering is desire and attachment. Similarly, according to the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, ignorance, avidya, is considered the fundamental cause of suffering. From avidya arise egoism, attachment, and the deep tendencies that bind human beings to conflict and sorrow. This ignorance does not merely mean absence of intellectual knowledge. One may possess education, information, and intellectual brilliance and yet remain deeply ignorant in the spiritual sense. True ignorance is the failure to perceive the unity of life. When human beings forget their deeper nature, ego slowly takes control, and once ego dominates the mind, separation begins. We divide ourselves into religions, castes, nations, languages, political groups, and social identities. We begin thinking in terms of us and them. And from this sense of separation arise conflict, hatred, insecurity, competition, violence, and fear. Humanity suffers because it has forgotten its essential unity. Perhaps if we observe carefully, we can see how the same psychological restlessness that creates suffering within an individual also begins shaping society itself. An inwardly disturbed mind gradually creates an outwardly disturbed world. Today, we must carefully observe the kind of individual society we are creating. We know that youth are the future of the society. In a class, for example, in a class of 50 children, we know they also have a group. Why? Because they observe the elder generation. Okay? Because they have seen from childhood that we have created groups, religious groups, political groups, economical groups, social groups. So they also have groups in the school. Rich kids have one group, toppers have one group, religious groups. What are they learning from us? From their elders, from the elders, from the older generations? And we blame them and complain that this new generation, the youth, our new generation children are intolerant. They cannot tolerate even the smallest thing. Who taught them this? The elders, we, the older generation, being intolerant towards other religions, being intolerant towards other religious beliefs. So they learn all those things. And have you ever imagined how much pressure they have? They don't understand, they don't know what to do, they don't know what is their identity. And through social media, and the main culprit is the social media, I'll say, news channels and public discourse impressions are constantly being planted into the minds and hearts of people, especially the young, the youth. The way events are portrayed, the narratives that are repeated, and the emotions that are stimulated profoundly influence collective consciousness. We often believe that we are free to say or do whatever we like without realizing the long term consequences of our actions. We often believe that we are free to say, very every thought, every word, and every attitude contributes to shaping future generations. The value we normalize today become the psychological environment in which tomorrow's youth will grow. In many ways, we are creating future generation in our own image. I repeat, in many ways, we are creating future generations in our own image. Therefore, the responsibility before humanity is immense. If we continue to nurture division, fear, hatred, and separative thinking, the same tendencies will multiply in society. But if we cultivate understanding, compassion, unity, and brotherhood, we can help create a more harmonious world. And perhaps this is why humanity today possesses extraordinary technological advancement, yet still struggles to find peace. Theosophy offers a profoundly different vision. The very foundation of the Theosophical Society is universal brotherhood, not brotherhood based upon religion, nationality, caste, or race, but brotherhood based upon the unity of life itself. Theosophy reminds us that humanity is deeply interconnected, and when this understanding awakens, selfishness slowly begins transforming into compassion. A spiritually immature mind constantly asks, what can I gain? But a spiritually mature mind slowly begins asking, how can I help? I repeat, a spiritually immature mind constantly asks, what can I gain? But a spiritually mature mind slowly begins asking, how can I help? And perhaps one of the deepest crises faced by modern youth today is not merely stress, it is identity. It's the identity crisis. Many young people silently ask themselves, who am I? What is the purpose of my life? Why do I still feel empty even after achievement? Modern society gives enormous amounts of information but very little wisdom. We are taught how to compete but rarely how to understand ourselves. We are taught how to earn money but rarely how to live peacefully. And therefore, Many young people achieve external success while inwardly feeling lost. Now, when we examine modern education honestly, we can clearly observe this imbalance. Children grow up surrounded by comparison, competition, pressure, and expectation. In schools, children who secure high marks are praised, but children with different talents, music, creativity, kindness, poetry, compassion, and art, are often neglected. If a child scores 99 out of 100, many parents, how many parents are there who will say that you did a great job? No. Many parents immediately ask, where did the remaining 1 mark go? Instead of appreciating the 99, attention becomes fixed upon the missing one. And slowly, children begin feeling that love and acceptance depend upon achievement. This creates tremendous psychological pressure. Then, later, when youth experience depression, stress, or emotional breakdown, society blames them. But perhaps we should honestly ask, who created this pressure? People often say youth today are careless. But I remember one thing, I was very young, around 17 or 18 years old, and I was completely new to theosophy. I attended a session by Sister Suglina where she was addressing the whole mass of youth, and um, I was also a part of that. Uh, I would say that I was very inspired by her talk, and more than that, her personality and the way she was speaking to the young mass. But the one thing I never forgot, that she said, youth are not careless, they are caredless. That sentence was a hit to my, I don't know, but that hit me so hard. Like, I repeat, youth are not careless, they are caredless. And children absorb the world around them. They learn division from society itself. They observe religious conflict, political hatred, social comparison, and material obsession. And naturally, these patterns become part of their own thinking. Even social media reinforces these tendencies continuously. Young minds are constantly influenced by superficial standards regarding beauty, success, popularity, and lifestyle. And therefore, instead of merely criticizing society, we must understand the deeper roots of the crisis. How many of us have gone to the root cause of the crisis among youth, the identity crisis, the pressure? Why the youth is like this? We have not. It's time to think about it. Annie Besant once emphasized that the purpose of education is not merely to prepare a child to earn a livelihood, but to build character and awaken the deeper dimensions of human life. And perhaps that is exactly what humanity urgently needs today. Not merely educated minds, but awakened hearts. There is another beautiful story that explains this wonderfully. I don't know the source again. Once there was a teacher. People from nearby villages visited the teacher to seek advice for their problems. The teacher and his students used to listen, ponder, and offer solutions the best they could. One of the students who participated in many of these discussions became impatient. These people are so ignorant, he used to say, shaking his head and crying out with frustration. There is so much ignorance in the world. His teacher noticed this. He advised his student against his behavior of looking down on other people, but in vain. One day, the student and the teacher were on their daily stroll. They came across a large hall and went in. It was evening, and the hall was dark inside. There was so much darkness in here, said the teacher. Yes, there is, the student agreed. Oh, there is so much darkness in here, the teacher repeated it, frustration in his voice. The student was confused. He looked at his teacher and repeated, Yes, teacher, indeed there is much darkness. But the teacher continued to complain. So much darkness. Oh, so much darkness. The student became irritated and finally said, Teacher, shouting about darkness will never remove it. We need a lamp. The teacher smiled and replied, The same is true of ignorance. Complaining alone cannot remove it. We must bring light. And perhaps this is one of the greatest messages of theosophy. Transformation does not happen through criticism alone. It happens through awareness, through wisdom, through compassion, through inner awakening. So naturally, the question arises, how can humanity move towards such transformation? Theosophy emphasizes three very important practices: study, meditation, and selfless service. But these values cannot suddenly be imposed upon society. The seeds must be planted gradually, especially during childhood. Earlier parents and grandparents often narrated meaningful stories to children, stories filled with kindness, courage, wisdom, and moral beauty. These stories quietly shaped character. I remember when I was a kid, whenever we used to go to our um, grandparents' house in the summer holidays, we all cousins sit around our grandparents, and then we were like, we were we used to listen very beautiful stories about life, about their life stories, and that had some impact in our life. Still, whenever I am in some kind of trouble or any confusion, those stories help me. Similarly, compassion must also become a living experience. For example, instead of only celebrating birthdays through expensive gifts and parties, children can also be encouraged to share with orphanages, homes for the needy, or suffering communities. When compassion becomes experience rather than theory, the heart slowly begins to transform. And transformation always happens slowly. Awareness grows slowly. Meditation grows slowly. Compassion grows slowly. But as awareness deepens, desires gradually lose their domination over the mind. Then comparison begins disappearing. Inner conflict reduces, and slowly peace emerges. Meditation becomes especially important today because modern life has filled the human mind with constant stimulation. Noise everywhere, information everywhere, distraction everywhere, but very little silence. And without silence, self understanding becomes difficult. Meditation is not merely closing the eyes for a few minutes, it is learning to observe oneself deeply, to understand one's thoughts, fears, reactions, desires, and emotions without condemnation. And through such awareness, transformation begins naturally. Jai Krishnamurti once said, while expressing your desires, you must exercise control in order to prevent them from causing harm to yourself or to others. This understanding is extremely important because Theosophy does not teach separation, it teaches awareness. It does not ask humanity to blindly believe, it asks humanity to awaken, to inquire, to observe, to understand life deeply. And perhaps that is what modern youth truly need today. But merely more information, but wisdom. Not merely achievement, but meaning. Not merely success, but inner peace. So I would like to conclude with this thought. Stress itself is not entirely harmful. A certain amount of pressure can motivate us towards sincere effort and responsibility. But when stress becomes fear, comparison, greed, insecurity, or endless desire, it destroys peace. Therefore, the real solution lies not merely in changing outer circumstances, but in understanding ourselves deeply. We must rediscover contentment. We must rediscover compassion. We must rediscover the unity of life. Theosophy has given humanity profound wisdom, but wisdom becomes meaningful only when it is lived in daily life. And if we can truly practice these teachings, then perhaps we can create not only peaceful individuals, but also a more peaceful humanity. I would like to end with the simple thought: if there is a darkness in the world, let us become a lamp. If there is hatred, let us bring compassion. If there is confusion, let us bring understanding. And if there is suffering, let us become instrument of peace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Smita Pragya. It was a very inspiring deliberation. And though we had aimed for this talk helping young minds, youth who's joining the society, but I would take it equally as this is a message for everyone at any age, because in some context we all are young. We are ever evolving, ever learning, ever changing. So I think, staying young is a good opportunity, because we keep on expanding our knowledge, our consciousness, learnings from each other. It's a very good thing you did by telling us the stories, by quoting examples, and probably imbibing that encouragement in us that yes, we might change. And when we change, the things around us appear to change. That's a very good thing you did. Thank you so much, though it was a very short planned talk, but it is very, very motivating, and I'm sure it has helped many of us sitting here and people who down the line hear it out when we release it to the world. Thank you so much, Smita Pragya. And here we end this session. We would not do any question answers after such a talk. Rather, we would go ahead with our closing prayer. Thank you all of us sitting here. I mean, whoever joined, taking out time for Smita Pragya. Thank you. सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः, सर्वे सन्तु निरामया, सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु, मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्. ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. So we close the session. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.